One moment, the train was there. The next moment, it was gone. More than 100 passengers boarded a sightseeing train in Italy in 1911. It entered a mountain tunnel in broad daylight. Railway workers watched it disappear into the darkness of the passage. But the train never came out the other side. No wreckage was found. No damaged tracks. No sign that the locomotive had ever existed beyond that final moment. Tonight, we are exploring the strange and unsettling story often connected to the legend of the Zanetti Train disappearance. A story that blends real historical reports with one of the most mysterious transportation legends ever told. By the end of this journey, you will understand what witnesses claimed to see, what investigators searched for, and why this vanished train continues to haunt railway history more than a century later. In the early 20th century, trains symbolized progress. Steel tracks connected distant cities and carried travelers across landscapes that once took days or weeks to cross. Passengers trusted the railway completely because trains followed fixed paths. They could be delayed, they could derail, but they could never simply disappear. The excursion train organized by the Zanetti Railway Company was meant to be a pleasant sightseeing trip through the Italian countryside. Wealthy travelers, curious tourists, and families boarded the polished steam locomotive, expecting a relaxing journey through valleys and mountains. The morning began like any other railway trip. Passengers chatted inside the comfortable carriages while the countryside slowly rolled past the windows. Fields stretched into the distance and small villages appeared along the tracks as the train moved steadily toward the mountainous region that marked the highlight of the excursion. Ahead of them was a newly constructed railway tunnel carved directly through a mountain. Engineers had built it to shorten the route, and trains had already passed through it many times without incident. It was less than a kilometer long, and normally took only moments to cross. But on that day, witnesses later described something unusual near the entrance. As the train approached the dark opening in the mountainside, a strange mist appeared to drift around the mouth of the tunnel. At first, it looked like ordinary fog or steam from the locomotive. But several passengers inside the train reportedly began to feel uneasy as the haze thickened around the tracks. Two men suddenly forced their way through one of the carriages in visible panic. According to later accounts, they shouted warnings to the other passengers and rushed toward the doors just as the locomotive neared the tunnel. Moments before the train entered the darkness, both men jumped from the moving carriage and tumbled down the rocky embankment beside the rails. Seconds later, the train disappeared into the tunnel. Railway workers nearby expected the locomotive to emerge from the other side almost immediately. The tunnel was so short that a train usually passed through it in less than a minute. But the train did not reappear. Minutes passed. Workers began to worry. Eventually, a search team entered the tunnel to investigate. What they found was impossible to explain. The tunnel was completely empty. The tracks ran straight through the mountain exactly as they should. The stone walls were intact, and there were no signs of collapse or derailment. There was no debris, no smoke, no damaged rail cars. The train, carrying more than 100 passengers, had vanished without leaving a trace. If you have reached this point in the story, you are probably someone who enjoys exploring the strange mysteries hidden in forgotten history. Welcome to Ruins and Remains, where we uncover the disasters, disappearances, and lost events that time tried to bury. If stories like this fascinate you, consider subscribing and continuing the journey with us. The two men who jumped from the train were the only survivors connected to the incident. Both were injured, but alive, and their testimony only deepened the mystery. They claimed that moments before the train reached the tunnel, a strange white mist began filling the carriages. It did not behave like normal smoke or steam. Instead, it slowly spread across the floor and rose through the air, creating a thick fog that made several passengers panic. One survivor later described the sensation as if the train were moving into something unnatural rather than simply entering a mountain passage. Investigators searched the tunnel repeatedly in the days that followed. Engineers checked every section of rail and examined the surrounding mountain for hidden passages or structural damage. Nothing explained the disappearance. Over the years, the story grew even stranger as rumors and legends spread across different countries. Some accounts claimed that an old-fashioned train, resembling the missing locomotive, had been seen emerging briefly from tunnels in distant parts of Europe before vanishing again. Other stories suggested similar sightings far away in Mexico decades earlier. Most historians believe these reports were likely exaggerations or folklore that developed around the original mystery. But the legend endured, transforming the vanished train into one of the most unsettling transportation stories ever told. More than a century later, the truth behind the disappearance remains unknown. A train entered a tunnel in full view of witnesses, and it never came out again. Stories like this remind us that even in an age of engineering and precision, history still holds mysteries that refuse to be explained. If you enjoy uncovering these forgotten stories, consider liking the video and joining us again for the next journey into the past here on Ruins and Remains.